All right, let me show you some numbers. We're going to talk about Rick Barnes here. I want to get this out of the way. This is brutal. Now, look, what you've got, I didn't know what it was going to turn out. I didn't want to go back through every coach who ever played, but I wanted coaches who are in the Rick Barnes zone. So what I did was I went and looked up all the coaches who've got 700 wins who are either still active or retired in the last 5 years. So, no, Henry, Iba, and Adolph Rupp are not on the list. But you got 15 guys. I know that everybody compares him to Pearl, so I put Pearl on there. He's in red, even though Pearl hasn't coached that long, doesn't have 700 wins. Now, it shows you how many NCAA tournaments each of these guys coached in. It shows you how many times they lost in the first round plus, meaning if they lost in a play-in game. Lost in the second round, lost in the Sweet 16, lost in the Elite Eight, or made the Final Four plus, means just making the Final Four. You may have lost in the title game, may have won the title, whatever, that means making it. You got two things over on the far right. Look over there, reached Final Four percentage. That's how many times of your tournaments, and what percentage of those tournament trips you've made it to the Final Four. You go down to the bottom of that list, and there's Cliff Ellis. Now, he's got 700 wins, but he's only been to 10 tournaments. He's never made a Final Four. The next worst on this list, Rick Barnes, 27 tournaments. He's made one Final Four. That is a percentage of 3.7%. All right, now you look up Krzyzewski, 36% of the time. Izzo, 32% of the time. Patino, 30%. Now, Bruce Pearl's only at 8%, but he's got a shorter career, so a win for him will change those numbers more. All right, so Rick Barnes is at the bottom of the list in terms of these great coaches when it comes to reaching the Final Four. Look at the category next to that. Pre-Sweet 16 exits. It's the next to the last category. At the bottom of the list, again, you got Cliff Ellis down there at 70%. But worst is 70.3%. That's Rick Barnes. 70%, more than 70% of the time, he's out before the Sweet 16. 27 NCAA trips, 19 times he's been out in the first or second round. And I just noticed something today. Bruce Pearl's down there too, but Bob Huggins, look at Bob Huggins' numbers compared to Rick Barnes. It's almost, they're very similar. And those are two guys I would never consider to be similar in anything. So in terms of, I think Rick Barnes is Bob Huggins with a halo. He's the good Bob Huggins. He's the one that doesn't embarrass your school. But in terms of these great coaches, he's basically the worst about making the Sweet 16 and the worst about making a Final Four. Now let's take a look at him by month, okay? Here we go. There's their record this year. It's in the far left column. That's what their record was by month this year. And then in the middle is what their record's been, what his team's records have been over the last 17 seasons. I went back to 2008, his last Elite Eight trip. And then you get the winning percentages. 787 in November, 787 December, 618 January, drops to 598 in February, drops to 562 in March. I put this on Twitter. We've done this before, but I put it on Twitter, mistake. And people started barking that, well, of course, dummy, everybody loses in March. It's tougher. Well, let's take a look. I wanted to find the next two coaches. Go ahead and flip it. I wanted to find the two closest two coaches that are closest to Barnes. Well, that's Bill Self and John Calipari. 803 wins, 805 wins, 813. And, yeah, they win 70% of their games in March. So when I put up a number on Twitter, I'm not just pulling it out of thin air. It means something. What you see with Barnes compared to his peers is he's winning 58% of his games in March. That's an 8% drop-off from what he normally does. These other guys that are right around him, 72%, that's a 4% drop-off from what? So there's a drop. It's half as much as what Barnes has. Okay, I've got all the numbers out there. Here's the question. Jimmy Hyams, I'll start with you, and we'll have to be kind of quick. Why is a coach that's so good in the regular season so bad in March?
I called multiple coaches through the years, and two recently. And the common thread was they feel like Rick Barnes practices his team too hard late in the year. And it's not just the physical part. They also spend too much time on film study, the combination. One coach told me that Bob Knight, instead of having 2-hour practices, would practice 1 hour. Film study would be cut from 1 hour to 30 minutes. So that's what the prevailing opinion was, that his teams get tired late in the year, mentally and physically, because of the practice and the film sessions.
And we brought this stat up before. This year, they're 290th out of 350 teams, 360 teams in terms of bitch minutes. So in addition to mental and practice fatigue, you're also getting a lot of wear and tear on your starters this year. Will West, your thoughts?
I think that Rick Barnes, we all know what he's going to do. We know what his tendencies are. I think if you and I know, then literally every coach in college basketball probably knows, and there isn't a lot of adjustment. I also think he does too much. Last year in the FAU game, if you remember, at about the 11-minute mark, right after the under 12 timeout, He puts in 5 guys and none of them could score. 80 was the leading scorer of the 5 that were out there. It was like 80, Key, and a bunch of bench guys. Like, it doesn't make any sense what he's doing. Kind of like when Zakai got in foul trouble in the first half against Kentucky. You put a kid that's been out there 13 minutes in the entire year of 2024. I think he does too much as far as trying to tinker with his lineup, and I think he also has tendencies he will not get away from at times.
Mark.
Yeah, I agree with all that. He has adapted over the years, and I think that's why you've seen some progression in his program of getting to a #1 team in the country or being a top 5 team in the country consistently. I think he has progressed in that. But Jimmy hit on one part of it. It's not just the physical toll. Like, he'll go over there and practices will be shorter, but it's the mental side of being able to get away from the game for a little bit. I mean, they have what's called vitamins, and they go in and outside of practice, they get a certain amount of shots up or they get their treatment in, and it's great. Like, it's all encompassing, but they got school, they got other things going on, and it's just, I think mentally it can wear on you.
I also wonder, and I'm guessing you guys would disagree, but I've talked to enough people who played for Philip Fulmer to know that when Florida Week came around, a different mood hit that facility because he got tight, everybody else got tight. People who played for Johnny Majors, same thing, only with Alabama. When it was Bama Week, he got tight, team got tight, facilities felt like it was caving in. I just think these guys know. They know what's on social media. They know what's being said. Either A, they pucker up a little bit because they know what his track record is, or B, and I think this is probably a bigger part of it, when you see those guys cry at the end of tournaments and stuff, I think they press because they want to be the team that reverses that for him. I do. I think there's part of it may be tired. I think part of it may be they're pressing or puckering a little bit simply because they know what their coach is carrying into the tournament.
Can't
That kind
rule
of
that out.
baggage.
Cannot rule that out.